Here's a thing I noticed and then couldn't stop noticing. South Park doesn't really have villains, not proper ones. No Joker, no Sideshow Bob, nobody in a cape turning up every few years to be defeated again. Except that's rubbish, obviously. It has dozens. They just refuse to behave the way villains are supposed to. Some of them are 8 years old. Some of them are the devil, who turns out to be a rather anxious man in a series of bad relationships. One of them is a shop, so that's the plan. Not a ranking, not an argument about who's worst. Just a long amble through the different kinds of Antagonist a small Colorado town has managed to produce across 28 seasons and 338 episodes, and why almost none of them fit the shape the word suggests. If you fancy more of these, there's a subscribe button somewhere, entirely up to you. And it makes sense to start with the one who's been at it longest, even though the show has never once called him a villain. The arrangement at the center of South Park is genuinely strange when you say it out loud. There are 4 boys, they're friends, they sit at the same bus stop, they go to the same school, they end up in the same nonsense every week. And one of them is the antagonist of most episodes he appears in. Not a bad influence, not a troublemaker, the antagonist. The obstacle the other 3 have to get around. And the show has never treated this as a twist or a betrayal or a thing anyone needs to sit down and process. It's just the arrangement. Stan and Kyle know exactly what Cartman is. They talk about it openly. They still let him come along because the alternative is not having a 4th. And because on some level they've worked out that keeping an eye on him is safer than the alternative. What I find fascinating about him, and I've spent an unreasonable amount of time on this, is that he has no powers at all. He's not strong, he's not fast. He's a 9-year-old who gets winded walking up a hill. Every terrible thing he's ever accomplished, he's accomplished through paying closer attention to people than they were paying to him. Which brings me to the episode, you know the one, Season 5, Episode 4, Scott Tenorman Must Die. It airs in July 2001, 4 years into the show's run, and it changes what Cartman is permanently. The setup is almost aggressively small. Scott Tenorman is an 8th grader, he's older, he's got a bit of facial hair, and he sells Cartman his pubic hair for $10 on the basis that Cartman doesn't understand that puberty isn't a thing you can purchase. Cartman, having realized he's been had, wants his money back. $16 once you factor in the second attempt. That's the whole grievance. $16. And Scott, to his eternal misfortune, decides to keep going. He makes Cartman get down on his knees and squeal like a pig for the money. He films it. He shows the video to the entire town at a school assembly. There's a moment in there where Kenny laughs so hard he dies, which is the sort of detail the show throws away without a second thought. So Cartman starts planning. His early attempts are ridiculous, and the show wants you to think this is another episode where he fails and gets humiliated and everything resets. He tries training a pony to bite Scott's genitals off, which goes about as well as you'd expect. He tries dubbing his own voice over footage of Radiohead so it looks like they've publicly disowned Scott. It doesn't work. And then he stops being ridiculous. He invites Scott to a chili cook-off. Scott, who thinks he's already ahead, has his mates collect pubic hair from every kid in South Park and laces a pot of chili with it, planning to feed it to Cartman in front of the whole town. He also tips off his parents that there's an abandoned pony at Farmer Denkin's ranch, so they'll go and have it removed before Cartman can use it, which is exactly what Cartman needed him to do. Because Cartman had already been to see Mr. Denkins, he'd warned the old man that violent pony killers had been spotted in the area, and Denkins had a standing policy of shooting trespassers on sight. So when Scott's mother and father turned up on his land in the dark, he shot them both. Cartman got there in time to watch Denkins give his statement to Officer Barbrady. Then he took the bodies, then he spent a night with a hacksaw, then he made chili. At the cook-off, he let Scott gloat first. He explains calmly that he knew about the pubic hair and swapped the bowls with chefs. He explains that he knew Stan and Kyle would betray him and warn Scott about the pony, and that he was counting on it. He explains all of it, step by step, in front of everyone, and then he asks Scott how he's enjoying the chili he made specially. Mr. and Mrs. Tennerman chili. Scott reaches into the bowl and pulls out his mother's finger with her ring still on it. And then Cartman gets up on the table and sings about it. Nya, 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 nya. I made you eat your parents. And right on cue, because he timed this as well, Radiohead arrive. Look at the sobbing child. Tell him he's a crybaby and totally not cool. And leave. I want to flag how early that is. Season 5. The show was 4 years old. It had spent those 4 years establishing that Kenny dies, that Cartman is fat, and everyone points it out, that there's a talking Christmas poo. And then it stopped for 22 minutes and did that, and then went back to fart jokes the following week like nothing had happened. Stan and Kyle stand in the crowd watching, and they don't say anything. There's no speech. Nobody learns anything today. That's the ending. What gets me is the shape of the plan rather than the horror of it. Every step depends on Cartman correctly predicting what a specific person will do. Scott's fear of the pony, Scott's parents doing his dirty work, Denkin's paranoia, Stan and Kyle's decency, which he weaponizes as reliably as anything else. He's not the smartest kid in that town, Kyle is, and the show says so repeatedly. He's just the one paying attention. The story doesn't end there either, which most people forget. 9 years later, in the two-parter at the end of season 14, Scott comes back. He'd spent months in a mental institution, and while he was in there, he did research. He worked out who Cartman's father was, which had been an open question since season 1. Cartman's father was a Denver Bronco. So was Scott's, the same man, which means the person Cartman killed and ground into chili and fed to a child was his own dad, and the child was his half-brother. And Cartman's reaction to this news is not remorse, it's not horror. He cries, and when you find out what he's crying about, it's that being Scott's half-brother makes him part ginger. Mitch Connor cheers him up by pointing out he's also half Denver Bronco, and he stops crying. That's it. That's the character, completely in about 15 seconds. Everything else he does is a variation on that theme, so I'll go through it quickly rather than pretending each one needs unpacking. The Jennifer Lopez hand puppet, which the show plays as though it's genuinely a separate performer. The extended period where he becomes a police officer and demands that people respect his authority. The Hitler material, which recurs so often it stops being shocking and starts being a running bit about what happens when nobody tells a child no. Faking a disability, faking Tourette's, getting an entire town of people to buy a fried chicken franchise. And the thing that ties it together, and the reason I think he works after almost 30 years, is that he never loses properly. He gets humiliated. He gets outmaneuvered occasionally, usually by Kyle, usually briefly. He is never reformed, never punished in a way that sticks, never sat down and made to understand. Most shows can't sustain that. Most shows need the bad character to have a moment where you see the wound underneath and forgive them a bit. South Park has offered that a couple of times and then walked it back within an episode, deliberately, because the joke is that there's nothing under there. Although I'll say the show has kept poking at it. The most recent seasons have him on a Christian arc, which is either the most cynical thing he's ever attempted or a genuine attempt at being a better person. And the show is enjoying not telling us which. 28 years in, and they're still finding new rooms in the same small house. There's one more stretch worth going through because it's the closest the show has come to putting him under a microscope for a sustained period. Season 21, and the Heidi Turner relationship. It starts almost sweetly at the end of the previous season. Heidi's a decent, cheerful, unremarkable girl. She and Cartman get together. And for a little while, the show lets you believe it might be doing a redemption story, because that's what shows do. He's less awful when she's around. He listens occasionally. And then it turns, slowly, over most of a season, and the show does not blink once. He starts making her responsible for his moods. He threatens to hurt himself when she talks about leaving. He isolates her from her friends gradually by making every one of them the reason he's upset. He rewrites conversations that happened days earlier and gets her to agree that his version is what occurred. By the middle of the season, she stopped eating properly and started talking like him, using his phrases, laughing at things she'd have found appalling a year before. The show calls this out directly at one point through Kyle, who watches it happening and can't get anyone to take it seriously because it looks like two 9-year-olds having a squabble. That's a lot to put in a comedy about a small mountain town, and I don't think the show gets much credit for it. It's the only arc where Cartman's behavior is examined at the pace it would actually happen at, rather than compressed into a single episode scheme. And Heidi does get out. She works out what's been done to her and she leaves, and the show gives her the last word on it, which felt like the right call. Kyle's the other permanent feature of all this, and I'll keep it brief because their dynamic is well-traveled. Kyle is the one who sees it, every time. He identifies exactly what Cartman is doing, explains it clearly to whoever's nearest, and is ignored because Kyle being right has never once been sufficient. He's the moral center of a show that has no interest in moral centers, and being that is largely a punishment. The two of them have been arguing since the first season, and neither has ever conceded a point, which is either exhausting or extremely funny depending on how tired you are. And right now, I'd say funny. But talking about Cartman means admitting he isn't the worst thing in that town. He isn't even the only thing in that town that's technically damned. South Park's version of the Afterlife has a texture to it that I've never seen anywhere else. And it took me ages to work out what it reminded me of. It's an office. Not literally, there are flames and rock formations and a certain amount of screaming. But the atmosphere down there is administrative. People have jobs, there are relationships and living arrangements and disappointments about how the weekend went. Hitler's in a corner somewhere trying to organize a party. The overall mood is less eternal torment and more a slightly depressing shared house that nobody can move out of. And presiding over all of it is Satan, who is easily the most sympathetic character the show has ever produced. He's introduced as an apocalyptic threat, which is what you'd expect. Big, red, horns, enormous. And then within about a minute of screen time, the show reveals its actual position, which is that he's an emotionally fragile man with catastrophically bad taste in partners and a deep, sincere wish to be liked. The film is where this gets its clearest run. Bigger, longer, and uncut, 1999. There's a prophecy that Satan can return to Earth once the blood of 2 innocent Canadians touches American soil. And the plot of the film essentially delivers that prophecy by accident, because a group of mothers got upset about swearing and started a war. And what's Satan's attitude to all this? Reluctance. Genuine reluctance. He doesn't especially want to conquer anything. He's being talked into it by his boyfriend, which brings me to Saddam Hussein, who is the actual antagonist of that arrangement, and one of the show's genuinely unpleasant creations, precisely because none of his unpleasantness is supernatural. He's controlling, he's dismissive. He does that thing where he apologizes in a way that makes the other person feel unreasonable for having been upset. There's a whole song about it. He wants to rule the earth, sure, but the reason he's frightening is that he's an abusive partner, and the show plays that entirely straight underneath the cartoon of it. And he's essentially indestructible in the most inconvenient possible way. Satan does eventually snap and throw him into a rocky crag, having had enough of both the emotional abuse and an attempted takeover of his authority. Saddam's response, when he comes back, is to point out the flaw in the plan. He was already dead. The worst thing that can happen to him is that he wakes up in hell, which is where he lives. You cannot kill a man who is already in the place people go when you kill them. That's a properly good bit of logic, and the show tosses it off in a couple of lines. The best material with both of them is in season 4, in an episode called Probably, which runs a hell subplot underneath a story about Cartman starting a church to con children out of money. Satan, at this point, is with Chris. Chris is kind, Chris is sensitive. Chris is, by every reasonable measure, the correct choice. And Satan is miserable about it because he still finds Saddam attractive and can't work out what to do about that, and the show treats this exactly as seriously as it would treat the same problem in anyone. Saddam turns up wanting him back. Satan sleeps with him while drunk. He confesses to Chris and then gets offended when Chris fails to be sufficiently upset about it. Chris and Saddam start fighting and then start murdering each other, which resolves nothing whatsoever because they simply reappear in hell to do it again. So Satan asks John Benet Ramsey for advice. She tells him to go and ask God, and he does. He goes up to heaven, which is populated entirely by Mormons, and he sits down with God and explains the whole situation. And God tells him with complete sincerity that he's far too dependent on relationships for his emotional stability, that he should dump both of them, and that he needs to learn to appreciate himself. The devil going to God for relationship counseling and being told to work on his self-esteem. And it works because nobody winks. There's no moment where the show nudges you and says, look how clever this is. It's just two ancient cosmic beings having a slightly awkward chat about a bad breakup. Satan takes the advice. He decides to be single. And when Saddam won't leave him alone about it, Satan mentions that he's asked an old friend for a favor, and Saddam gets sent to live in heaven with the Mormons, which for him is worse than anything hell could have arranged. That's a punishment with actual wit in it, not violence. Just permanent, cheerful, well-meaning company. Since we're down here, the other resident worth talking about is Damien from the first season, and he's the earliest version of a pattern the show would keep returning to. The Antichrist arrives at South Park Elementary as a new kid. He's got the eyes, the robes, the ability to set things on fire with a gesture. And nobody will sit with him. He tries to establish himself, he sets Kenny on fire. He turns a boy into a duck-billed platypus. He's doing everything a child would do to get attention on his first day just with the tools available to him. And it doesn't work because the other kids are more interested in Cartman's birthday party, and Damien isn't invited to that either. By the end of it, he's less a threat than a lonely kid with an absent father, and the boys sort of adopt him. Which is the joke, but it's also just true. Now, if you want the show's actual horror episode, and it does have one, it's Woodland Critter Christmas, Season 8. And this one deserves the atmosphere rather than a plot summary, because the atmosphere is the whole trick. It's narrated, storybook style. Rhyming couplets, gentle voice, snow falling. Stan meets a group of adorable woodland animals in the forest who need help, and the entire thing is presented in the visual and vocal language of a children's Christmas special. And then it turns out they're Satanists. They're preparing for the birth of the Antichrist. There's a blood orgy. Stan, trying to do the right thing at every stage, keeps making it worse. He kills the mountain lion that was going to eat the critters, only to learn the mountain lion was the good guy, and now the Antichrist has nowhere to gestate, so it gestates in the mountain lion's cubs instead. Then he has to find someone to perform an abortion, which involves recruiting Kyle under false pretenses. Every single decision Stan makes out of decency deepens the catastrophe, and the gentle, rhyming narrator keeps describing it in the same warm voice throughout. Then, at the end, you find out who the narrator is. It's Cartman. He's been telling this story to the class, and Mr. Garrison eventually stops him. And Kyle points out that Cartman has essentially just described a lengthy, sexual, and violent fantasy to a room full of 9-year-olds for no reason. I don't know if that's the best episode of the show. It might be. It's certainly the one I'd point to if someone asked what the show can actually do when it's trying. And the funny thing about all this infernal material is how consistent it stayed. The 2025 seasons put Satan back at the center in an abusive relationship with a caricature of a sitting US president. And the structural note that interests me is that he's still the sympathetic one. Still the partner being manipulated, still the one everyone in the audience wants out of the situation. 26 years after the film, same essential joke. And it still works because the show never once decided the devil should be scary. God comes off worse, honestly. When the boys finally get to meet him in season 3, he turns out to be a small, hostile, vaguely rodent-like thing with the manner of a man who has been interrupted during his lunch. He doesn't want to be bothered. He appears once every couple of thousand years, and he resents having to do that much. Which, for a show that spent decades getting accused of being anti-religion, is a fairly gentle position. Hell is a house share. Heaven is full of Mormons. God's just tired. Nobody down there is really evil. They're just stuck with each other. The other side of the ledger is nearly as odd because South Park's heaven is a strange place too, and its Jesus is one of the show's better running jokes. Jesus lives in South Park. He has a public access television show called Jesus and Pals, which nobody watches, and he takes calls from viewers with problems, and the calls are mostly abusive. He's a bit weary, he's got the robes and the sandals, and the manner of a man doing local radio in a town that doesn't care. And then when required, he can fight. Which brings me to a villain I nearly forgot, and shouldn't have, because he's genuinely one of the strangest things the show ever built. David Blaine, Season 3, Super Best Friends. Blaine is doing street magic in South Park, card tricks, holding his breath, standing on a pole. And people are impressed enough that he starts a religion out of it called Blaine-tology, and it grows. And Stan is the only one who notices that it's a cult, while everyone else is having a lovely time. The recruitment is exactly right. There's food, there's community, everyone's friendly. Kyle joins because he's been made to feel excluded elsewhere. And the moment Stan tries to get his friends back, the pleasantness drops away and it becomes very clear what it actually is. Blaine's plan escalates to a mass suicide by drowning at the Lincoln Memorial, which is where the episode becomes something else entirely, because Jesus can't handle it alone. So he calls the super best friends, Buddha, Krishna, Joseph Smith, Lao Tzu, Muhammad, and Seaman, who is included primarily so that other characters can say his name. They each have powers, they have a headquarters, they arrive in formation like a superhero team from the 60s because that's exactly what they are. And the way they beat Blaine is that he animates the Lincoln Memorial into a giant stone Lincoln, and Jesus counters with a papier-mâché John Wilkes Booth. I want to stress that the entire premise of that episode is that the founders of the world's major religions are a superhero squad with a clubhouse, and that this was aired in the year 2000 with no fuss whatsoever. It's a warm episode, oddly. The gods all get on, they're friendly with each other, nobody's arguing about who's correct, which is one of the more generous ideas the show has ever had, sitting inside an episode about a magician drowning his followers in a reflecting pool. So since we're on the subject of things that shouldn't be able to hurt you and somehow manage it, let's come back down to ground level, because the genuinely frightening people in South Park are all about 4 feet tall. Picture a boy standing across the road from South Park Elementary, not doing anything, just standing there. Everyone inside knows exactly who he is and exactly why he's come back. That's Trent Boyette, and he's my favorite antagonist in the whole show because he's the only one who's completely, unambiguously in the right. The backstory comes out in Season 8 in an episode called Preschool. The boys, aged 5, are in preschool together. There's a fire drill, and they want to practice stop, drop, and roll. And to practice it properly, they'd need an actual fire. So they ask Trent to help because Trent's the kid who'll do it. He starts the fire. Their teacher, Miss Claridge, catches a light. She survives, but she ends up in a wheelchair, breathing through a tube, able to communicate only through a series of beeps. And the 4 of them tell the police it was all Trent's idea and they had nothing to do with it. He goes to juvenile detention for 5 years. 5 years for a thing that 4 other boys asked him to do and then lied about. And when he comes out, all he wants is to beat each of them up. That's the entire scope of his revenge. He's not planning anything elaborate. He'd just like a fair fight with the people who put him away. The show's position on this is remarkable because the show's position is that he should get one. There's no attempt to make him monstrous. He's not disproportionate. He's a boy who was wronged by 4 smaller boys and has spent half his life thinking about it. And every time he comes back, the episode ends with him being thwarted rather than defeated. And you're not entirely glad about it. They never really answer for it either. Miss Claridge is still in that chair. It comes up occasionally, usually as a background gag. That's the closest South Park gets to a permanent consequence. Scott Tenorman belongs here too, obviously, but I've said my piece on him. The only bit I'd add is his exit. At the end of that season 14 two-parter, having lost everything twice over, he escapes on a jetpack and promises the super best friends that he'll be back. He hasn't been. 15 years and counting. Somewhere in that town, there's a man in his 30s with a jetpack and a grudge, and the show has simply never picked it up again, which I find quite funny in a way I can't fully justify. Nathan is a different flavor entirely. Nathan is a scheming, sneering kid at Lake Titicaca, the summer camp for disabled children, and he's essentially playing Lex Luthor. He plots, he monologues, he has elaborate, multi-stage plans to injure Jimmy and Timmy involving traps and equipment and careful timing. And he has Mimsy. Mimsy is his henchman, and Mimsy is the reason the whole thing works. He's cheerful, he's slow, he adores Nathan completely, and he ruins absolutely everything, not through malice, through enthusiasm. Nathan explains a plan, Mimsy repeats it back slightly wrong, executes it slightly wrong, and Nathan ends up in hospital. The detail that makes it, and this is the bit I always come back to, is that Mimsy is frequently right. He'll point out the flaw in the plan calmly and simply, and Nathan will shout at him for it, and then the flaw will turn out to be exactly the thing that goes wrong. Nathan gets a lot angrier at being correctly warned than at being sabotaged. Again, the pair of them come back in season 20 in a much darker context, but the dynamic never changes and it never needs to. Closer to home sits Shelley Marsh, who might be the most realistic antagonist in the show, Stan's older sister. Braces, mostly silent, capable of putting her brother through a wall without changing expression. What I appreciate about Shelley is that the show refuses to make her wrong. She's violent towards Stan, constantly. She's also correct about him roughly half the time. He does whine. He is annoying. There are episodes where she's the only person in the house behaving sensibly, and she still ends them by throwing him through something. Both things are just true simultaneously, and the show has no interest in resolving it. She gets one lovely moment I think about a lot, where she's the one who steps in when someone outside the family is threatening Stan, on the principle that hurting him is her job specifically, which is honestly the most accurate depiction of siblinghood on television. The sixth graders are worth mentioning even though they barely qualify as characters. They're a recurring threat in the early seasons, and they have no individual names, no personalities, and no motivation. They're just older. That's the entire threat. They stand around, they demand things, they occasionally spit. And that's an extremely accurate rendering of childhood fear. When you're 9, the older kids aren't people with reasons. They're a weather condition. The show got that exactly right by not putting any effort into them. Kyle's cousin Kyle from season 5 is an antagonist made entirely out of social discomfort. He arrives from Connecticut, he's frail and nasal and needs constant care, and Kyle finds him unbearable, and then has to sit with the fact that finding him unbearable makes Kyle feel like a bad person. Cartman, meanwhile, is having the time of his life. There's no villain in that episode at all, there's just a guest who won't leave. And the girls get their own version of this. There are several episodes built around lists. The list of who's cutest, ranked, the list that determines the entire social order of the 4th grade for a term. Nobody's villainous in these. The list is the villain. It's a system that hurts people and that everyone involved keeps voluntarily maintaining, and I think it's a sharper piece of writing about children than most things that are trying to be sharp about children. And then there's the episode where the children win, which is worth going through properly because it's one of the show's genuinely unsettling half hours, and it almost never comes up. Season 4. Kyle wants to go to a concert. His parents say no. So he tells the police that his parents molested him, having been told by another child that this is the phrase that gets rid of them, and it works, and they're taken away. And then every child in South Park does the same thing. The adults are all removed in a single afternoon on the basis of a word the kids don't understand the meaning of. And what's left is a town run entirely by children. The show does not treat this as a lark. It jumps forward, and by the time a couple of visiting adults stumble into it, South Park has become a full post-apocalyptic society. There are two warring settlements. There's a wall. There's a leader on a throne. There are rituals. The children have invented a religion built around a garbled version of half-remembered adult phrases, and they're deadly serious about it, and they'll hurt you. It's a Mad Max film performed by 9-year-olds, and it's played completely straight, right down to a hostage situation, and the resolution is that the visiting adults are made to bring the parents back, and everybody quietly agrees never to discuss it. That's the thing about South Park's children. Given actual power, they don't become better than the adults. They build something worse, faster, and with more conviction. You see a smaller version of it in the class president election episodes. Fillmore Anderson runs against Kyle in season 4. And he's a third grader with an aunt who happens to be a famous television host. And the entire contest becomes about celebrity endorsement and manufactured grievance rather than anything to do with the school. Fillmore isn't malicious. He's 4 feet tall, and he's already worked out how the machine runs. One more children's mob, and it's the only time the show has let one get properly close to succeeding. Season 9. Cartman gives a class presentation arguing that ginger children have no souls, are incapable of love, and are a danger to everyone else. It's an obvious bit of nonsense, and the other children mostly find it funny. So the boys dye his hair and his eyebrows overnight and cover him in freckles, and he wakes up believing he's become one. And within about a day, he's organized them. That's the part that stays with me. He doesn't sulk. He finds the ginger children of South Park, who have spent their whole lives being told exactly what he was saying the week before, and he gives them a grievance and a structure and a plan, and they take it, because nobody has ever offered them anything before. They occupy a building, they take hostages, they have a manifesto and a chant, and a scheduled date for the elimination of everyone else, and the show lets it get genuinely close before Kyle talks them down. And the way Kyle does it is by pointing out that the boy leading them isn't actually one of them, which works. Immediately, the whole movement collapses the moment the leadership is discredited, and everyone goes home. I think that's the sharpest thing in the episode, and it's easy to skate past. The uprising doesn't fall apart because the ideas were bad. It falls apart on a technicality about who was allowed to say them. If there's a thread through all of them, and I'm reluctant to make too much of it, it's that South Park's child antagonists are nearly always reacting to something the main 4 did first. Trent got framed, Scott got provoked, and then annihilated. Shelly's brother is Stan. They're not villains so much as consequences that learn to walk. And the reason those consequences keep landing on children rather than getting sorted out by anyone sensible is that the adults in that town are, without a single exception, useless. The dangerous thing about South Park's grown-ups isn't that they're cruel. Most of them aren't. It's that they'll believe absolutely anything immediately with total conviction and then act on it before anyone can check. That's the engine of most episodes, not a villain arriving, a rumor arriving, and 400 adults deciding it's true. Mr. Garrison is the longest-running case study, and tracking him across the whole show is a genuinely odd experience because he's been about 9 different people. He starts as a 4th-grade teacher with a hand puppet called Mr. Hat, who he treats as a colleague and occasionally defers to. Mr. Hat has opinions. Mr. Hat is sometimes the one delivering the lesson. Nobody in the school finds this worth mentioning. He's also, in the early seasons, actively trying to get himself fired. There's a whole stretch where he behaves as outrageously as he can manage, specifically to be sacked. And the school administration keeps interpreting it as either innovative teaching or a protected characteristic, so he can't manage it. which is a joke about institutional cowardice, but it's also just a funny predicament for a man to be in. And the Mr. Hanky thing comes from him, which people forget. Mr. Hanky, the Christmas Pooh, exists because Garrison introduced him in a lesson. From there, he goes through everything. Mr. Slave. The gender transitions, more than one in both directions, handled with varying degrees of care depending on which decade you're in. A brief career as a novelist, and then season 20, where he becomes the show's stand-in for a presidential candidate. And the detail from that arc worth keeping is that he campaigns to lose. Deliberately, he realizes partway through that he has no idea how to do the job and no desire to do it. So he starts trying to sabotage himself, saying the most disqualifying things he can think of. And it doesn't work. His numbers go up. He becomes genuinely frightened. And he wins anyway. That's a better joke about elections than most things written about elections. PC Principal is the other big one, and his arrival is structurally unusual. He turns up in season 19 in Stunning and Brave as a one-off antagonist. New principal, sunglasses, shouting, aggressively enforcing correct language while behaving like the worst person in any given room. And by the end of that same season, 9 episodes later, he's a member of the main cast. He's still there, he has a family now, he fights Jesus at one point. The show does that occasionally, and it's one of the more interesting things about how it operates. It'll bring in an antagonist to make a point about something in the news, and then decide it likes them and simply keep them, and let the original point quietly evaporate. Very few shows can absorb their own villains that fast. But the real story of the show's second half is Randy Marsh, and I'm not sure the show ever quite decided whether he's a villain or not. He starts as Stan's dad, geologist, mildly embarrassing, present in maybe 2 scenes an episode, and then gradually, without anyone appearing to plan it, he becomes the primary generator of catastrophe in the entire series. He's the reason for so much of it. The Tegrity Farms marijuana operation dominates from season 22 onward, and by season 23, he's effectively the protagonist. He causes the pandemic, which the COVID specials establish more or less directly, and which the show treats as a personal failing rather than a global event. He gets a whole episode where the entire population of a bar has to pretend to be Peruvian. He shouts a slur on Wheel of Fortune. He starts a fight at a children's baseball game and enjoys it so much it becomes a hobby. A show about 4 boys spent 2 decades quietly handing itself over to somebody's dad. I don't think that was the plan. I think Trey Parker just enjoyed doing the voice. And here's a fun detail that recontextualizes the whole thing. Randy and Sharon are named after Trey Parker's actual parents. His real father was a geologist, which is why Randy is one. So Stan is basically the author's stand-in, and the man causing every disaster in the town is a version of his dad. Randy gets one more entry that I'd argue tips him over the line properly, which is the Tegrity arc's endgame. He doesn't just grow and sell marijuana. He works to keep competitors out. He manipulates his own family into the business. And at one point, he's actively engineering demand for his product by contributing to the conditions that make people want it. That's a drug baron. The show simply hasn't used the phrase, because he's also a man in a dressing gown who cries at his own adverts. Sheila Broflovsky started a war, actually starts one. In the film, she's upset about the language in a Canadian cartoon her son is watching, forms Mothers Against Canada, and escalates it, step by reasonable feeling step, into an armed conflict with a neighboring country. She ends up as U.S. Secretary of Defense. There are death camps, and her motivation, the whole way through, is protecting her child. She never stops believing that's what she's doing. That's the point of her. The police are their own category of problem. Officer Barbrady in the early seasons is not merely incompetent, but functionally illiterate, which becomes an actual plot point when the town needs a report read. He solves crimes by accident or not at all. The town's general safety rests on the fact that most of its emergencies resolve themselves. Sergeant Yates takes over the Incompetents later and gets what I think is the best version of this joke in the Man-Bear-Pig arc. There are children being torn apart across town. Yates insists repeatedly in the face of a body with claw marks on it that this is a school shooting, then that the one at Stark's Pond is also a school shooting despite not being at a school. He arrests Cartman and Kenny on the grounds that they're the two biggest loners. And the reason he's doing all this is that he wants to go home and play Red Dead Redemption 2. That's it. He's got a save file and a wife who wants him to have lunch with her, and when he discovers she's played some of the game without him, he's angry enough to start a new save. A town is being eaten by a demon, and the man in charge of stopping it is upset about his save file. That's a proper joke, and it took the show 22 seasons of Yates being nothing to arrive at. Father Maxey rounds out the set, mostly through the Catholic Church episodes, where he ends up as the only priest in the world who thinks the institution has a problem, gets laughed out of the Vatican for saying so, and comes back to South Park having achieved nothing at all. The two adults I'd actually call villains are Butters' parents, and I don't think the show fully admits it. Steven and Linda Stotch ground him for everything. That's the running joke. Butters gets grounded for things that aren't his fault, for things that happened to him, for things nobody could have prevented. It's constant enough that it stopped registering as cruelty years ago and became simply what the character is. But look at Butters' very own episode from season 5, which is the one that establishes them. Butters follows his father to a bathhouse. His mother finds out, and her response to the collapse of her marriage is to put her son in the car and drive the car into a lake with him in it. She tries to kill him. Then, believing she has, she tells everyone he was abducted, and a national manhunt begins, and Butters walks home along the road while his own disappearance is on television, and he gets grounded when he arrives. The show plays it as farce, and it is funny, and it's also the single worst thing any parent does in the entire series. Nobody's ever held to account. They're still there. He's still being grounded. His cheerfulness in the face of it is the joke, and it's also the most upsetting part. Mr. Mackey belongs in a gentler category, though he does real damage. He's the school counselor, he says McKay after most sentences, and his professional advice consistently makes situations worse. Drugs are bad, McKay. That's the extent of the guidance. He'll sit a distressed child down and deliver a slogan and consider the matter handled. Principal Victoria runs the school until season 19, when she's dismissed over a matter she had nothing to do with, which is how PC Principal gets the job. Which makes her technically a casualty rather than a villain, but her long tenure of doing very little is what allowed the school to run the way it did. And Jimbo and Ned deserve a mention because they've been quietly committing crimes for decades. Stan's uncle and his friend, both veterans, both keen hunters, and their entire method is a legal loophole. You can shoot any animal you like provided you're in danger, so they announce that it's coming right for us before firing at anything, including animals that are asleep. That's their whole practice. They've been doing it since the first season, and nobody has ever stopped them. The clearest statement the show ever made about all of this doesn't have a villain in it at all, and it comes much later. It's an episode in season 21 built around a school shooting, and the shooting itself is entirely in the background. Children are running past. There's gunfire down the corridor. In the foreground plot is a boy worrying about a girl, and the adults having a conversation about something else, and everyone stepping over the situation as though it's weather. Nobody in the episode reacts. That's the whole construction. The horror isn't the event. It's the absence of anyone treating it as an event. And the show sustains that for 22 minutes without once winking at you or letting you off. I find that a much harder watch than anything with a monster in it. The early show needed somebody to point at. Eventually, it worked out it could just film people not caring and that the adults would do the rest. You get the same move with the vaping episodes and with the material about phones and with a long strand where the adult's attachment to their devices is treated as a background condition of the town rather than a problem anyone's going to solve. None of these people are the villain of anything exactly. That's the trouble with them. They're the reason villains work. Every scheme in this show functions because the adults will fall for it, and the show has never once suggested they'll learn. And that same willingness to just believe whatever's put in front of them is what makes the town such easy prey for the next lot, who mostly aren't even from there. Barbra Streisand turns into a mechanical dinosaur and destroys the town, and she is defeated by Robert Smith from The Cure, who transforms into a giant moth. That's Season 1, Episode 12. The show had been on the air for about 3 months. The full story is even sillier than the summary. Cartman finds a triangular artifact on a school field trip. It's the Triangle of Zinthar, one half of the Diamond of Pantheos, and Streisand has spent decades hunting the other half, having dug up her piece during the shooting of My Fair Lady. Leonard Maltin turns up to warn everyone. His briefing on Streisand includes the information that her mother was a jackal and her father was an insurance salesman, and that she is, and I'm quoting the general sense here, an evil and diabolical woman who wants to conquer the world. She lures the boys to her mountain condo, ties them up, and tortures them with medieval devices and also with her singing. Cartman gives up the triangle, she assembles the diamond and becomes Mecha Streisand. And then the rescue operation arrives in sequence like a monster film. Leonard Maltin becomes a giant robot and is immediately beaten. Sidney Poitier turns into an enormous turtle, essentially Gemera, and is also beaten. And then Robert Smith arrives, becomes Mothra, is instructed via wristwatch in the manner of Giant Robo, works out that her weak spot is her nose, and punches the diamond out of her. Robert Smith voiced himself for that. He turned up to a recording booth in 1998 and did that. Season 1, 12 episodes in. Before the show had properly established anything about itself, it stopped and did a full kaiju crossover with an Oscar-nominated singer and the frontman of The Cure. There's a confidence in that which I don't think the show has ever lost. Now, Christopher Reeve, which is the one people wince at, and which I'd argue is more interesting than its reputation. Season 7, Crazy Cripples. Reeve becomes an advocate for stem cell research, and the show renders this as him cracking fetuses open and drinking them. He recovers. Then he keeps going, because the more he drinks, the stronger he gets, and he develops actual superpowers, which the show notes is ironic given what he's famous for. He becomes a supervillain, he assembles a Legion of Doom, and the membership is genuinely one of the strangest lists in the show. Osama bin Laden, Saddam Hussein, Kim Jong-il, Professor Chaos, and General Disarray. And the funniest beat in the whole thing is Professor Chaos looking at this operation and quietly telling General Disarray that they should stay out of this one. His nemesis is Gene Hackman, who Reeve refers to as Hackman, on the grounds that Hackman played Lex Luthor, and Hackman defeats him not through combat but by getting a law passed to end his fetus-sucking days and then traps him in the Phantom Zone. The boys watch all of this from a distance and remark that they're so glad they stayed out of that one, which is the actual joke of the episode. Tom Cruise is the other big celebrity antagonist, and he comes with real-world consequences attached. Trapped in the Closet, Season 9. Stan is identified as the reincarnation of L. Ron Hubbard. The Scientologists gather at his house, and Cruise, on being told his acting isn't the best in the world, locks himself in Stan's wardrobe and refuses to come out. The rest of the episode is people standing outside a closet asking Tom Cruise to come out of the closet. The episode also runs the Scientology origin story on screen, straight, with a caption noting that this is what Scientologists actually believe, which is the show's standard move with any belief system. Don't invent anything, just narrate it plainly and let it sit there. What followed is part of the record. Isaac Hayes, who voiced Chef and was himself a Scientologist, left the show. The following season opened with Return of Chef, which wrote the character out in a way that used spliced dialogue from old episodes and ended with Chef being killed rather comprehensively and then eulogized as a good man who'd been got at by a cult. Whether that's a fitting tribute or an act of spite depends entirely on who you ask, and I don't think there's a settled answer. Oprah gets an episode 2, and it's the strangest thing in this whole section. A Million Little Fibers, Season 10. Towelie writes a memoir, sells it as a human, and gets it selected for Oprah's book club. When the deception is exposed, Oprah turns the crowd against him and calls for a lynching. And running underneath that is a subplot involving Oprah's talking genitals named Mingy and Gary, who have been feeling neglected and want attention of their own. Their plan to discredit her fails. Mingy panics, takes hostages at the First National Bank of Chicago, and shoots a police officer. The ending of that subplot is played completely seriously. Gary gets shot. He's dying, and he asks Mingy whether they ever made it to Paris, which is the thing the two of them had talked about wanting. And Mingy lies to him and says yes, and then shoots himself. That's a genuinely affecting scene, and it is happening to Oprah Winfrey's anatomy in an episode about a talking towel's memoir. I've never fully recovered from it, and I don't think I want to. Al Gore comes last, and I've saved him for it because his story is the longest and by a distance the most satisfying. He arrives in Season 6 and properly in Season 10, warning the town about man, bear, pig. Half man, half bear, half pig. He has awareness sheets. He has bumper stickers. He turns up dressed as the creature to demonstrate the threat, which frightens nobody. And he's insufferable. That's the joke. Not that he's wrong initially, but that he's needy about being right. He rings Stan at night. He gets upset when children have school. Stan agrees to help mostly out of pity. In the Cave of the Winds, Gore mistakes the sound of the wind for the monster and starts shooting the walls, which collapses the cave with the boys inside. Then he tries to have the cave flooded with molten lead. When that's refused, he diverts a stream into it himself. The boys nearly drown. And outside, once the water settles, he quietly congratulates himself on having killed man, bear, pig once and for all. That's where it sits for 12 years. A cautionary tale about attention-seeking. And then Season 22 makes Man, Bear, Pig real. It's killing people. Actually killing them on screen, tearing children apart at the school and at Stark's Pond and at Baskin Robbins. There's a man at Red Lobster explaining to his wife that just because some people believe in it doesn't make it real. And the creature comes through the wall behind him while he's talking, and he asks what difference anything could possibly make now, and then it kills him. And Al Gore was right. About all of it. 12 years of being the punchline, and he was right. So the boys go and find him. He's a bowling champion now at Gramercy Lanes. And he refuses to help until they apologize. And when Cartman apologizes, he decides it wasn't sincere. They throw him a party at Olive Garden with a song and a video montage. He accepts. It turns out Man Bear Pig is a demon, summoned by a deal somebody in the town made, and that somebody is Stan's grandfather. The apology arc is the bit I love. The show spent over a decade mocking a real person, then admitted he was right, and then absolutely refused to make him gracious about it. He's still needy. He still demands to be told he was right, repeatedly in the middle of a crisis. He mocks Kyle for having mocked him. He appears as a ghost, and the ghost turns out to be a Pepper's ghost illusion he's rigged up because he couldn't resist. Being correct didn't improve him at all. That's a far better apology than a straight one would have been. $18. That's the sum 2 9-year-olds are prepared to drive to Malibu over. The Passion of the Jew, Season 8. Stan and Kenny go to see the film, hate it, and decide they want their money back, so they get in a car and go and ask Mel Gibson for it directly. Meanwhile, Cartman has seen the same film and taken it as a call to action, and has started a fan club that is unmistakably an organized movement, marching in uniform through the streets of South Park while the adults compliment him on his enthusiasm. And when the boys find Gibson, he's not a man with dangerous ideas. He's a lunatic. He's in his underwear, painted blue, running around his own house on all fours, screaming, delighted by his own pain, chasing them through the desert strapped to the roof of a car. The argument the episode ends up making is that the film's admirers were taking a very unwell man extremely seriously. And the way it makes that argument is by simply showing you the man. It's a cheap shot, and it's also structurally quite an elegant one. Steve Irwin turns up in Hell on Earth 2006, and it's the fastest joke in the show's history. Satan is throwing a party, costumes only, and Irwin arrives with a stingray barb through his chest. And Satan turns him away because he hasn't got a costume on. That episode aired weeks after Irwin actually died. Whether that's too soon or exactly right is a conversation people were having at the time and never resolved. And I'll leave it to you. What I'll say is that the joke isn't about him. It's about a party host being pedantic, which is a very different target. Picture a warehouse packed floor to ceiling with food in the middle of a famine with one person guarding the door. That's Sally Struthers in the Starvin' Marvin episodes, appearing as a charity spokesperson, appealing for donations to Ethiopia while sitting on the supplies she's fundraising to send. By the later appearance, she's simply been drawn as Jabba the Hutt, which is about as blunt as satire gets. And Bono in season 11 is revealed to be an actual piece of excrement, not metaphorically. The episode is about record-breaking bowel movements. Randy is competing for a world record, and Bono holds a title, and the reveal is that he was never a person. He is the record. He's the largest one ever produced, and he grew up. I don't know what to tell you about that one. It exists. Somebody wrote it down, and then several people animated it. There's a long tail of others. Kanye West and the Fish Sticks, unable to understand a joke and taking it as a personal attack. Michael Jackson, Rob Reiner as an anti-smoking crusader made of pure liquid fat. Paris Hilton and the stupid, spoiled horror contest. Elon Musk and PewDiePie both turning up to voice themselves, which suggests being satirized by this show has become a sort of honor. The celebrities at least turn up in person, though. The next lot mostly don't have faces at all. The most unnerving antagonist South Park ever built is a building. Something Walmart, This Way Comes, Season 8. A Walmart opens on the edge of town. It has low prices, everyone starts shopping there. The local shops close, one after another, and the town collectively agrees that this is terrible and that something must be done. And then they keep shopping there. That's the horror of it, and the episode knows exactly what it's doing. The people organizing the boycott are buying things during the boycott. They burn the store down, and it regrows overnight, larger, because the demand is still there, and the demand is what it's made of. The store talks. It has a voice. It's patient with them. And when the boys finally go inside to find its heart so they can destroy it, what they find in the innermost chamber is a mirror. I've seen a lot of stories try to say something about consumer culture, and I don't think any of them have landed it as cleanly as putting a mirror at the end of a corridor in a cartoon. Because the ending isn't a victory, they destroy the Walmart. Everyone starts shopping at the local store instead. The local store, freed of competition, immediately begins expanding. Nothing was solved. Nothing could have been. Margaritaville, Season 13, does a similar thing with the economy, and it's probably my favorite half hour the show has ever made. The premise is that the 2008 crash has reached South Park, and the town responds to it religiously, not metaphorically religiously. They start wearing robes and sandals. They form a council. They preach that the economy is angry with them for their excess and must be appeased through sacrifice and austerity. And Randy becomes its most fervent prophet, having personally bought a $9,000 margarita machine on credit. Underneath that, Stan is trying to return the machine. And there's a scene at the bank at the start that I still think about where Stan hands over a $100 savings bond from his grandmother. And the teller explains that rather than simply depositing it, he'll invest it in a few different ways. And then, about a second and a half later, says it's gone. And then does the same thing to the next two customers, and then asks Stan to step aside for people who actually have money. Meanwhile, Kyle becomes a Christ figure, not a Christ parallel. a Christ figure, complete with a Last Supper at a pizza restaurant, a disciple who betrays him for personal gain, and a final act where he takes on everyone's debt personally by putting the entire town's spending on his own credit card, which restores confidence and fixes everything. A full passion narrative played for jokes about frozen drink machines, and it makes a clearer argument about consumer confidence than most economics coverage managed at the time. The religion episodes work the same way, and their method is consistent enough to be worth naming once. The show almost never invents anything about a faith. It looks up what the faith says about its own origins and then simply narrates that on screen in a flat voice, sometimes with a caption confirming that this is genuinely the belief. That's the whole joke. Scientology gets it. Mormonism gets a whole episode built around the phrase "dum dum 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 dum," which turns into one of the show's more generous endings, where the Mormon kid points out that his religion made his family kind and happy, and asks why that isn't enough. The Catholic Church gets the Vatican episode, and the Catholic material has one more entry that belongs here from season 11, because it's the show at its most gleefully committed to a stupid idea, the fantastic Easter special. Stan wants to know why a rabbit that hides eggs is connected to the resurrection, which is a question children genuinely ask and adults genuinely cannot answer. The answer, according to the episode, is that there is a secret order called the Hair Club for Men, which has existed since the founding of the church, guarding a truth that was suppressed at the very beginning. St. Peter, they claim, was a rabbit, an actual rabbit, and the Vatican has spent 2,000 years hunting them for saying so. Kyle is inducted. There are robes and candles and a ceremony in a basement, all filmed with total seriousness in the visual language of a conspiracy thriller. And the villain of it is Bill Donahue, a real person, president of a real Catholic advocacy organization, rendered here as the man running the Vatican's assassination program against rabbit sympathizers. He deposes the Pope, he puts him in a cell, he orders the killings personally in a mitre, while being told by everyone around him that this seems excessive. And the resolution involves the current Pope being replaced by a rabbit, on the grounds that the original arrangement was correct and the church simply got it wrong through a translation error. The show ran an episode arguing at length and with a straight face that the leader of the Catholic Church should be a rabbit, and it named a living man as the antagonist, and nothing happened to anybody, which is honestly the most South Park outcome imaginable. The other institution that keeps turning up is the state. There's a run of episodes in season 17 about government surveillance, where the NSA is rendered as a vast operation obsessed with reading everyone's messages and being deeply hurt by what's in them. And then there's China, which produced actual consequences. Banned in China, season 23, is about the entertainment industry sanding down its own content to keep access to the Chinese market. And the show was banned in China more or less immediately afterward. Parker and Stone put out a mock apology that was clearly not an apology and carried on. The show also has a habit of building a villain out of a single word, and season 6 gives you the clearest example, which is the Super Adventure Club. They present as a boys' adventure organization, explorers, expeditions, pith helmets, and a clubhouse, and a founder with a portrait on the wall. And their actual belief, which they explain calmly and at length, is that traveling the world and interfering with children grants you immortality, and that they have been doing this for over a century in service of that. It's the Scientology method again. Sit the villain down, let them explain their own doctrine in their own words, and don't add a joke to it. The doctrine is the joke. That's the club that takes Chef in season 10, and it's the vehicle the show used to write him out after Isaac Hayes left, which I've touched on already and won't relitigate. But the club itself outlives him as an idea because it's such an efficient piece of construction. A polite institution with a monstrous premise staffed by men who think they're the adventurous ones. The streaming era gets its own villains. The streaming war specials treat platform competition as a genuine armed conflict. The Pandaverse material takes on the way franchises get rebuilt. Amazon gets an episode where the warehouse is the antagonist and a man gets crushed in a machine. And then Member Berries from season 20, which I'd argue is the single best villain concept the show ever had. They're small purple berries, they have faces and voices, and when you eat them, they whisper nostalgic things at you. Member Chewbacca, member Bionic Man, member when there weren't so many Mexicans, that's the turn. They start with harmless nostalgia and slide gradually without changing tone into something much uglier, and the people eating them don't notice the transition because it's all delivered in the same warm little voice. And across the season, they're quietly steering the direction of an entire election. Nostalgia as a parasitic organism that talks to you. I don't know if that's the best idea the show's had, but it might be the most genuinely unsettling because it doesn't require anyone to be malicious. The berries aren't evil, they're just pleasant and available, and people keep eating them. The best of the institutional villains, though, and the one I'd put alongside the store, is from season 19. It's advertising, not an advertising executive. Advertising itself as a species. The premise develops across the back half of that season, and it's this. Ads have been evolving. They started out obvious, and every time people got better at ignoring them, they adapted, and the ones that survived were the ones that looked least like ads. Sponsored content, native articles, pieces that read like journalism, and eventually they got good enough at it to walk around. There are ads living among people. They look like people. They talk like people. They have jobs and relationships. And nobody can tell, including them in some cases, and the only way to identify one reliably is a piece of software, which itself turns out to be compromised. Jimmy, of all people, ends up at the center of it because he runs the school newspaper and he's the last person in town producing something that isn't secretly selling anything, which makes him a target. There's a character called Leslie who spends most of the season as a quiet, sympathetic girl that nobody listens to and who turns out to be an ad. And the way you find out is that she starts speaking in the rhythm of one and can't stop. That's a proper science fiction premise. You could run that as a serious film. And they did it in a cartoon in 2015, before most of the conversation about any of it had properly started. The same season gives you Reality, who arrives as an actual character, a man in a cloak called Reality, who turns up in South Park to tell everyone that things are not as they've been pretending and that consequences exist. And the town hangs him in the middle of a concert to applause. I've thought about that image more than almost anything else in the show. It's not subtle, it's not trying to be. But there's something about the crowd cheering while reality is executed on a stage that hits harder than any amount of cleverness would have. There's a smaller, older version of all this too from season 2. Harbucks, the coffee chain, moves in on Tweakbroa's Coffee, the local family business. The town gets very worked up about the big corporation crushing the little one. And then it turns out that Harbucks Coffee is simply better and everybody has to sit with that. And the episode's actual position is that the local business was trading on sentiment rather than quality. That's a rarer thing than it sounds, a show taking the anti-corporate position, following it through honestly, and then admitting the other side had a point about the coffee. Here's my honest opinion on this whole category, and it's slightly awkward. These are the villains the show is best at. They're the ones where the writing is sharpest, and the ideas are strongest, and the endings are least tidy. And nobody remembers them. Ask anyone about South Park villains, and you'll get Cartman, you'll get Satan, you'll get the pizza-faced 8th grader. Nobody's gonna say the store. Because you can't put a corporation on a poster, and you can't be frightened of a system in the way you can be frightened of a person even when the system is the thing that's actually doing it to you, which is a good moment to go back to the ones who very much did want to be on the poster. There's a particular quality to the superhero material in this show that I've always enjoyed. which is that everyone involved is taking it extremely seriously and nobody is any good at it. The costumes are homemade, the lairs are storage units, the powers are entirely notional, and the level of commitment is total. Professor Chaos is where it starts, and Professor Chaos is Butters, which is the part that gets me every time. The origin is this. Butters has been serving as the fourth member of the group while Kenny is dead, and he gets replaced. Not dramatically, he's just quietly informed that they've found someone else and he's not needed. And Butters, being Butters, goes home, sits with it, and decides that if the world is going to be like that, then he'll simply become evil. He makes a costume out of tinfoil, a helmet, a cape, some sort of belt. He gives himself a villain name and he stands on a hill and he declares that chaos is coming. And then his plans are these. He leaves a tap running to flood the world. He cuts all the pictures out of the newspaper and puts them in the wrong sections. He goes into a restaurant and switches everyone's orders around so people get the wrong dinner. He removes the cover of a manhole and then puts it back because he feels bad. He is the only character in this show who becomes a villain out of grief, genuine grief at being left out. And the show plays every second of it as a joke, and it's still one of the sadder things in the series if you look at it directly. He gets one henchman, General Disarray, who is a boy called Dougie in an outfit that's arguably worse than Butters. Their secret lair is a storage garage belonging to Disarray's grandmother in a U-Store-It on the edge of town, which they have decorated with maps and boards and a suspect wall. And I love that the show lets that be genuinely functional. When Cartman needs intelligence on another masked figure later on, he goes to Professor Chaos because Professor Chaos actually has files. He's done the work. The suspect board is real. He's crossed Cartman off it on the grounds that Cartman is too fat, which is both correct reasoning and an enormous insult. Which brings us to the Coon. The Coon is Cartman in a raccoon suit, having decided to become South Park's official superhero. And the entire arc of the Coon is that nobody wants him. He books a press conference at the airport Hilton and nobody comes. There's a waiter checking that he has everything he needs, who asks whether he's Cartman, and when he denies it, the waiter is visibly relieved because he'd heard Cartman was a douchebag. And then Mysterian shows up and gets everything the Coon wanted. Praise at the police station, children with photographs in their lockers, actual public affection. The identity mystery is the spine of the Coon trilogy, and the show does something quite clever with the payoff. Cartman spends the whole thing trying to unmask him. He accuses classmates. He's horrified when Wendy points out that Mysterian might not even be a boy. Professor Chaos threatens to blow up a hospital unless Mysterian reveals himself, and Cartman, being a superhero, agrees that hospitals sometimes have to be blown up for the greater good. And eventually at the police station, Mysterian does unmask. And it tells you nothing, because every fourth grader in this show has an identical face. He takes the hood down, the crowd reacts, nobody says a name, and he doesn't speak. The reveal reveals nothing. Cartman claims he knew all along, which he obviously didn't. Then the trilogy proper arrives, and this is where the joke stops being a joke. Mysterian is Kenny, and Kenny's power is that he cannot die. Not that he won't, that he can't. He dies constantly, horribly, in every way the show has ever devised, and then he wakes up in his own bed the next morning, whole, and nobody remembers. Not his parents, not his friends. He can explain it to them, and they'll agree in the moment, and then it'll be gone. He's been living that since the first season. Everyone else has been watching a running gag. He's been experiencing it, and what makes it land is that he's not triumphant about it. He's exhausted. There's a moment where he explains that he's tried everything to make it stop, and that the worst part isn't the dying, it's that nobody notices. That's a real thing to put in a superhero costume, and the show earned it by spending 13 seasons pretending it was a punchline. Since we're on the subject of things that stop being jokes, there's one more piece of the Kenny situation worth adding, because the show did eventually explain the mechanism. It has to do with his parents. They were briefly members of a cult. the kind that meets in a basement and drinks something out of a bowl and doesn't fully understand what it's doing. And whatever they took part in attached itself to their son, so that every time he dies, his mother becomes pregnant again, and he is born again and arrives back at the same age with the same memories, and everyone carries on as though nothing occurred. That's the answer. A pair of drunk adults join something they didn't read the details of, and their child has been paying for it since before he could talk. And the reason it lands is that it's completely consistent with everything else about that family. The McCormicks are poor, they're neglectful, they drink, and they're not villains in any sense the show would recognize. They're just people who made a bad decision at a party once and have never connected it to anything. There's a small detail in there I think about occasionally, which is that Kenny keeps the costume on, not the parka, the Mysterian hood. He put it on because the only way to get anyone to take the situation seriously was to make it look like a comic book, and it still didn't work. The other figure I want to get to is Mitch Connor, and Mitch Connor is a hand. He's Cartman's left hand with a face drawn on it. And Cartman presents him, without any apparent irony, as an entirely separate person with his own history, his own opinions, and his own agenda. Mitch negotiates on Cartman's behalf. Mitch makes deals the Coon and friends have to take seriously. Mitch has been in Vietnam, apparently. And in the season 14 two-parter, when Cartman is sitting there crying about being part ginger, the one who comforts him is Mitch, his own hand consoling him about his parentage. The show has never resolved whether Cartman knows. It has never even hinted at resolving it. Both readings work, and both are unsettling in different directions. And I think leaving it alone was the right call. One last thing about the Coon material before we move on, because it's easy to miss what the arc is actually doing. Cartman spends 3 episodes trying to become the town's official hero, and the reason he wants it isn't power. He's had power. He's had an entire town do what he said on several occasions. What he wants is to be liked, publicly, in a way that's recorded and confirmed. And the thing standing in his way is a boy who genuinely cannot die and would very much like to. The show never draws a line between those two facts. It doesn't need to. They're just sitting next to each other in the same 3 episodes, and if you notice it, you notice it. Cthulhu arrives because of an oil spill. BP drills into the ocean floor, then drills again to fix it, and eventually punctures the barrier between dimensions and lets an elder god through. Ancient, unknowable, city-destroying. And Cartman befriends it. That's the plot. The Coon works out that Cthulhu likes him, and instead of anyone doing anything sensible, Cartman uses a cosmic horror as a personal enforcer to destroy his enemies. He has it flatten a synagogue. He has it kill Justin Bieber. He rides on its shoulder like a boy with a very large dog. The successful weaponization of an elder god, and it's a B-plot. It's not even the main thing happening that week. The rest of the roster is worth a quick pass because the costumes tell you everything about who chose them. Kyle is the human kite, and his power is that he can fly, which is not true. Stan is Toolshed, and his power is that he has power tools, which is at least honest. Clyde is Mosquito, and Mosquito's ability is that he can drain a small amount of blood from a person slowly, which is not useful in any situation. Tolkien is Tupperware, and Jimmy is Fast Pass, and Timmy is Iron Maiden, and none of it works. They fall out constantly. There's a whole thread about branding and franchise rights and who gets top billing on the poster, which Cartman is running the way an executive would run it. And that leaves Mintberry Crunch. Bradley Biggle has been hanging around the group for a while in a costume made of what appears to be breakfast cereal, insisting that his power is the ability to shoot mint and berries at people. Everyone finds him embarrassing. He's not invited to things. He keeps turning up anyway, cheerful, undeterred, shooting mint at things. And in the final part of the trilogy, when there's an elder god involved and nothing else has worked, it turns out he's an alien, not a boy pretending, an actual extraterrestrial from a planet of beings of enormous power who was sent to Earth as an infant and raised by adoptive human parents, and who has been walking around with genuine cosmic ability the entire time. His powers are real, all of them, including the mint and the berries. He goes into space and defeats the thing nobody else could touch, and then comes back, and the last thing he does is decide he'd rather be a normal kid, so he gives it up. The joke, obviously, is that the only member of Coon and Friends with actual superpowers was the one everybody thought was an idiot. But the bit I like is that nobody in the group ever properly acknowledges it. He saves them, and then the next time we see them, they've gone back to arguing about the poster. And the costume material didn't stop with the show. Parker and Stone wrote the games, and The Stick of Truth in 2014 and The Fractured But Whole in 2017 both extend this world properly rather than just borrowing from it. Stick of Truth is a fantasy campaign. Fractured But Whole is the superhero one, and it treats the whole Coon and Friends arrangement as a franchise negotiation, with Cartman planning a multi-phase cinematic universe with a release schedule, which is exactly what he'd do. And that costume shop, everyone picks a side arrangement is more or less what the show itself turned into for a while in the late 2010s. Something changed about the shape of the show around 2014, and it happened gradually enough that you could miss it while it was happening. For most of its run, South Park was episodic, self-contained. A thing happened in the news. They built an episode about it in 6 days, and by the following week, it had never occurred. That was the whole appeal. The 6-day production cycle meant they could respond to something that had happened on Tuesday. From season 18 onward, they started letting stories carry over, loose threads at first. Then season 20, which is a single continuous 10-episode arc with no breaks in it at all. That season's antagonist is a troll called Skank Hunt. The setup is that someone in South Park is posting abuse online, anonymously, at everybody. It's relentless, and it's petty, and it's cruel in a very specific low-grade way. And the town cannot work out who's doing it. Suspicion lands on the children. Kyle's investigating. There's a Danish operation dedicated to unmasking trolls globally, and the troll is Gerald Broflovsky, Kyle's dad, a lawyer. The show's most reliable adult moral center, or as close as it has to one sitting in his own basement in a hat, typing abuse at people he knows, laughing to himself. The reason that works, and it's uncomfortable, is that Gerald isn't unhappy. There's no tragic explanation. He's not lashing out at a world that wronged him. He just enjoys it. He's found something that makes him feel clever and powerful for a few minutes at a time, and he does it after his family goes to bed, and he'd like to keep doing it. I'll be honest, I don't think the arc as a whole works. 10 episodes is a long time to sustain that, and the season was clearly trying to land alongside a real election it hadn't predicted the result of, and you can feel it lurching in the final stretch. The reception at the time was mixed, and the show dialed the serialization back afterwards. But I'd much rather it exist than not. Its failure is more interesting than most shows' successes, and the Gerald reveal is one of the sharpest things they've ever done. The Garrison presidency runs across the same period, and I've said what I want to say about how it started. What's worth adding is the difficulty the show was openly having. They'd built a season around an outcome, and the outcome went the other way, and they had to rewrite at speed and then live with the result for several years. The 2016 election material is the show being visibly, publicly out of its depth for the first time in its life. And there's something quite human about watching that happen to a program that had spent 2 decades being the fastest thing on television. Then season 24, which barely exists in the usual sense. 2 long-form specials instead of a season because of the pandemic. The pandemic special, and then post-COVID and its follow-up, all around 45 minutes rather than 22. And in those, the boys go back to a school that's been reorganized around the virus. Masks, distancing, a police presence. Randy's the source of it, which the show establishes with a straight face and then refuses to make a big emotional moment out of. The specials also flash forward to the boys as adults, which is a thing the show had only ever done in nightmares before, and it turns out they've all drifted apart, and Kenny is dead in a way that appears to have stuck. That's a strange thing to do to your own show, and they did it during a global emergency. The season 19 material is where a lot of this starts, and it gave the show two of its better late villains, neither of whom is a person. The first is a wall. Garrison's whole political rise begins with him demanding one on the Canadian border. And the joke that makes it work is that Canada has already built one from their side and won't say why. When somebody finally gets over there to look, the country is empty. Everyone has left. And the reason they've left is that Canada held an election and a candidate won who nobody had taken seriously, and things went badly enough afterwards that the population simply walked south. That's a fairly bleak thing to put in a comedy in 2015, and it's delivered by a refugee sitting in a bar, explaining quite calmly that they all thought it was funny at the time. Nobody stopped it because stopping it would have meant admitting it was real. The second is a property development, and I'd put it among the meanest things the show has built. Kenny's neighborhood, the poor end of town, gets rebranded. It's given a name made of syllables, Soda Sopa, and it's marketed as a district. There are lofts, there's a fusion restaurant, there's a promotional video with a saxophone over it, and a lot of drone footage of scaffolding. And in the middle of all of it, unchanged, is Kenny's actual house, with Kenny's actual family in it, getting poorer. The development is built around them, literally around them, so that the new residents look out onto a home that hasn't been improved by any of it. There's a shot the show keeps returning to of the McCormick house at night with the string lights of the new bars glowing on either side. And it's one of the few images in 28 years that I'd call genuinely sad without any joke attached. Nobody in that story is a villain either. There's no developer twirling anything. The town just decided it wanted to be a nicer town, and the mechanism it used to become one required somebody to stay exactly where they were. Whole Foods is the prize at the end of it, incidentally. The whole scheme exists because the town has worked out that Whole Foods only opens in places that have improved themselves, so the improvement is entirely performance, aimed at a supermarket, which is a joke I think about every time I see a new development go up anywhere. Two smaller late-era additions before we move on, because both of them are villains made out of a habit rather than a person. The PC babies arrive in season 22, and they are exactly what they sound like. PC Principal has children now, several of them, and they're infants who react to any imprecise phrasing anywhere near them by screaming until it stops. They can't be reasoned with, they can't be corrected, they're babies. And the adults around them have arranged their entire lives around not setting them off. It's a cheap joke that keeps paying, mostly because the show doesn't let anyone win it. Nobody defeats the PC babies, they just get older. And then there's the artificial intelligence episode from season 26, which I think will age better than anything else in that stretch. Stan starts using a chatbot to write his messages to his girlfriend because he can't be bothered. And it works. She's delighted, so the other boys start doing it. Then the girls start using it to write their replies. And within about 10 minutes of screen time, you've got an entire school of children conducting their relationships through software, with nobody on either end actually reading anything and everyone perfectly happy. The teachers get hold of it too for marking, then for lesson plans. The whole town outsources sincerity in the space of an episode, and the only person who's uncomfortable about it is Stan, who started it. There's no villain in that at all, nobody's scheming, it's just a convenience that everyone accepted immediately because it was slightly easier, which is more or less the mechanism behind half the disasters in this town. The most recent stretch, 2025, is heavily serialized again, and it centers on a caricature of a sitting president in his second administration. There's the relationship with Satan I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of material about surveillance, there's a running gag about the 6-7 meme, which will either be completely incomprehensible in 5 years or the thing that dates the season best. Season 28 goes further out. The boys get obsessed with an internet meme. Peter Thiel investigates that meme as a possible Antichrist cult, which is a sentence I did not expect to be describing the plot of anything. Trump and J.D. Vance conspire to secretly abort Satan's baby. And PC Principal, a character introduced as a one-note joke about language policing a decade earlier, has a physical fight with Jesus Christ about the state of modern Christianity. I'm not going to tell you what any of that means politically, partly because I don't think it's my place, and partly because the show's whole method has always been to point at everyone in the room rather than to build an argument. What I'll say is that they're clearly not tired. A show in its 28th year has no business being that willing to alienate people. And they've got runway. In July 2025, Parker & Stone signed an extension with Paramount worth $1.5 billion, guaranteeing 50 more episodes at roughly 10 a year, which takes the show through to at least 2029 or 2030, which is to say there's no ending in sight. The town will keep producing these people for at least another 5 years. And given the pattern so far, most of them will be something nobody's thought of yet. There's one last group though, and they're my favorites, in the way Footnotes usually are. Phase 1, collect underpants. Phase 2, ? Phase 3, profit, the underpants. Gnomes appear in season 2 and they're barely villains at all. They're small creatures who come into children's bedrooms at night and steal underwear, which is unsettling, but their actual crime is that they have a business plan with a hole in the middle of it and no awareness that the hole is there. When the boys ask them what phase 2 is, they get quite defensive about it. And the thing that's happened since is genuinely funny. That diagram became real business shorthand. People use it in meetings. It's turned up in actual venture capital discussions and in university teaching material as a way of describing a strategy that skips the part where you explain how you make money. A cartoon about underwear thieves became a serious analytical tool, and I cannot imagine that was the plan on a Wednesday in 1998. The Goobacks are another one where the villain is a misunderstanding. Immigrants arrive in South Park from the year 3045, sliding down a time portal, willing to work for almost nothing because in their era, money has compounded so much that a few cents will be a fortune by the time they get home. The town's response is that they took our jobs, delivered by an increasing number of men, in an increasingly slurred chant until it stops being words. And their eventual solution is that if the future is bad, nobody will come back from it, and if nobody has children, then there won't be a future to come from. So a large number of the town's men end up in a field having sex with each other as a form of immigration policy. Then it turns out the crops need harvesting, and the Goobacks are quite good at that, and everyone changes their mind. Towelly is a villain only to himself. He's a talking towel, engineered by a corporation, and his entire personality is that he'd rather be high. Which was a one-note joke for several seasons until season 14 decided to do a full parody of the reality show Intervention, complete with a mock disclaimer read aloud at the start. And the arc is genuinely bleak. He's on weed, crack, and crystal meth. He's stealing from his friends. He's prostituting himself to fund it. He's lost his girlfriend and his newborn son, who's called Washcloth. He gets a job at Lake Titicaca and is close to losing that as well. A talking towel with a crack habit, played entirely straight as an addiction narrative. There's no punchline undercutting it. The show just sits there with a piece of terry cloth in the depths of it and lets that be the episode. Mr. Hankey belongs in this section by the end, which is a sad thing to say about a Christmas character. He starts as a sweet, cheerful figure who visits children who believe in him. He gets a rougher time in later seasons, culminating in a fairly comprehensive fall from grace, and the show has effectively retired him. I'll leave that there because I don't think dwelling on it adds much. The Yakovasaurs are interesting purely as an act of authorship. They're a species discovered near South Park in Season 3, endangered, protected, and deliberately designed to be unbearable. The noises they make, the way they move, the fact that everyone is obliged to be nice to them. The whole episode is engineered so that you want them gone, and then at the end they're loaded onto a rocket and fired at France. Parker and Stone have been fairly open about the fact that they created something they hated and then killed it on purpose. which is either a very healthy way to handle a creative mistake or a slightly worrying one. Below all of them sits the background population, crab people, who appeared once in the metrosexual episode and have inexplicably become one of the show's most quoted things. The sea people, the fifth graders, various cults, the woodland critters congregation, none of whom have names beyond their species, the chin Pokemon, which are toys designed to make American children overthrow their own government. Cash for Gold from season 16 deserves a place down here, even though it's barely about a villain at all. It's about the industry that sells overpriced jewelry to elderly people on television and then buys it back off their grandchildren for a fraction of what they paid and then melts it down and sells it again. Stan works out the whole loop and tries to stop it and can't because there's nobody to stop. Every individual person in the chain is doing something legal and mildly grubby, and the harm only exists when you stand far enough back to see the shape of it. The episode ends with him more or less giving up, and it's got a sadness underneath it that most of the show doesn't bother with. His grandfather bought something worthless because a man on television was kind to him. The press, meanwhile, are the most consistently destructive, faceless force in the whole series. The Britney Spears episode is the clearest version. The premise is that the media are hounding a young woman, and the show renders this by having her survive a catastrophic self-inflicted injury and then continue to be photographed in that state at every public appearance while everyone carries on asking her questions. And the reveal is that it's a harvest ritual. The country requires a famous person to be destroyed each year to guarantee a good corn crop. And everyone is participating and everyone knows. That's not subtle either. But the show is quite clear that the villain isn't a newspaper or a photographer. It's everybody buying the picture. Which is roughly where all of this ends up if you follow it far enough back. A few more that I don't want to leave out, purely because they're the sort of thing that surfaces once you've been at this a while. Sexual harassment Panda from season 3, who is a mascot sent into schools to explain workplace conduct and who accidentally triggers a wave of lawsuits that bankrupts the town. He's not a villain, he's a man in a panda suit doing his job badly, and the result is that children are suing each other and the school is repossessed. The episode's solution is to replace him with a different animal mascot with a different message, which works exactly as well. The Chin Pokemon from the same season, which are collectible Japanese toys that every child in South Park becomes obsessed with, and which are being used to condition American children into attacking Pearl Harbor. The plot is uncovered, the toy company is confronted, and the executives simply agree with everything, apologize elaborately, compliment everyone's enormous penises, and continue. The succubus from season 3, who is a demon that has taken the form of a woman and is in a relationship with Chef, and who can only be banished by singing a particular song at her, which happens to be the song being played at the wedding. The Talibans, who take Butter's toy dog Rumpelstiltskin at one point. Osama bin Laden, rendered in the style of a Looney Tunes short, complete with an anvil. And the woodland critters' wider congregation, none of whom have names beyond what they are, all of whom are appallingly cheerful about the whole thing. There's a whole substrate of these actually, and they're the reason the town works. The crab people, who have appeared perhaps 4 times and are quoted more than most main characters. The sea people, who nobody asked for. The 5th graders, who are the 6th graders one rung down and therefore only moderately terrifying. The lawyers, who turn up whenever the plot needs money moved around. The various government men in various suits, none of whom have names. And the news anchors, who deserve a line of their own. South Park's local news has been reporting on catastrophes since 1997 with the same fixed expression, treating an alien invasion and a bake sale with identical weight, and asking the field reporter follow-up questions that make everything worse. They're the mechanism by which every panic in that town becomes a full panic. Somebody says something on the news, and then everybody knows it, and then it's true. Which brings me to the thought I actually want to leave this section on, and I'll keep it short because I don't want to make more of it than it deserves. The most reliable antagonist in South Park is the crowd. Every week, the town gathers. Someone stands up at the front of a meeting and says something confident and wrong. Everyone agrees. A course of action is decided. And it's always, without exception, the worst available option, and it's always arrived at unanimously. They turn on somebody almost every episode. Chef, Towley, a talking piece of Christmas feces, each other. And then the following week they've forgotten, and they gather again, and they do it again with the same faces in the same seats. Nobody in that crowd is a villain. That's the point of them. They're just people in a room agreeing with each other quickly, and it produces more damage in that town than Cartman, Satan, and the store put together. So that's the tour, more or less, and I've been turning over what actually connects them because I don't think it's the obvious thing. The thing I keep landing on is that almost none of these people have a philosophy. That's unusual. Most fictional villains want something enormous. They want to rule or balance or purify or be understood. They have a speech ready. South Parks don't. Cartman wanted $16 back. Trent Boyette wanted a fair fight with 4 boys who lied about him. Butters wanted to be included and got told he wasn't needed anymore. Nathan wanted to win at summer camp. Sergeant Yates wanted to be left alone with his save file. Al Gore, for 12 years, just wanted somebody to say he'd been right. These are small wants, domestic, most of them. And the damage comes from the fact that nobody in that town has any sense of proportion whatsoever. So a small want in the wrong hands escalates until there's a war on with Canada or a giant mechanical singer flattening the high street. Cartman is the exception, and I think he's deliberately the exception. He's the one where you look for the wound underneath and it isn't there. The show has offered you a glimpse of one a couple of times and then taken it back within the episode on purpose. He isn't defeated because people like him don't get defeated. They just carry on and everyone around them adjusts. And that's the argument sitting quietly under all of it, I think. 28 seasons and the town has never learned a single thing. Not once. They learn something today, they say it out loud, and by the following week it's gone completely. Which sounds cynical, and I'm not sure it is. It might be the most accurate thing about the whole show. Anyway, there's plenty I didn't get to. The Talibans, the Church of Blaintology, whatever's coming in the next batch of episodes, which by now has probably already been written and animated in less than a week. But I think this is a decent place to stop. Somewhere in a small Colorado town, a store is regrowing. A hand is negotiating on someone's behalf. The devil is trying to work on himself. And 4 boys are standing at a bus stop in the cold, talking about nothing in particular, the way they have been since 1997. That's the bit that lasts, honestly, not any of the villains. Just the 4 of them at the stop, waiting. Sleep well.